Hey man, let's talk about one of the darkest truths men eventually learn, often through heartbreak so deep it scars them forever: the illusion of a woman's love. In the beginning, it feels real, it feels permanent, it feels like you've finally found the one person who sees you, values you, and will never turn away. She looks at you like you're her entire world. She tells you you're her forever. She wraps her words in promises of loyalty and devotion, and you believe it. You believe it because you want to. You believe it because men are wired to love through loyalty, through sacrifice, through permanence. But here's the truth. The love you think she has for you is not built on permanence. It's built on feelings. And feelings, brother, are illusions. They shift, they fade, they betray the very promises that were built on them. That's why so many men feel blindsided when the woman who once swore she'd die without him suddenly leaves like he never existed. What men don't understand is that a woman's love isn't like a man's love. When a man says, "I love you," he ties it to commitment, to loyalty, to responsibility. He's saying, "I'm here no matter what storms come." But when a woman says, "I love you," what she's really saying is, "I feel love for you right now." It's not a contract, it's a confession of her emotional state in the moment. That's why she can mean it one day and walk away the next. Because when her feelings change, her definition of love changes too. And that's the illusion men fall for. They think her words carry the same permanence as theirs, when in reality, her words are just reflections of her emotions at the time. That's why she can tell you with tears in her eyes that you're the only one, then months later give the same words to another man without flinching. This is why love feels so cruel when it ends. Because you weren't just in love with her, you were in love with the illusion she created. She made you feel like you were her everything, like no other man could take your place. She mirrored back to you your own desire for permanence, and you believed her because it felt so real. But it wasn't real, not in the way you thought. It was real for her in the moment, but it was never built to last. That's why men struggle so deeply after breakups. They're not just grieving the woman, they're grieving the illusion, they're grieving the belief that her love was the same as theirs. And when that illusion shatters, it makes men question everything. Was any of it real? Did she ever actually love me? Or was I just a character in the emotional story she was telling herself at the time? The hardest truth to accept is this: women don't consciously lie when they say they love you. They mean it in that moment. The illusion doesn't come from malice, it comes from the fluidity of their emotions. But because men are wired for permanence, we treat her momentary truth as eternal truth. We anchor ourselves to her words, believing they'll carry through every storm, every trial, every test. And that's why we're destroyed when she suddenly detaches. We built our world on something that was never meant to be permanent. We built our foundation on sand, mistaking it for stone. And when the tide came in, the illusion washed away, leaving us standing in ruins. That's the trap of a woman's love. It feels eternal, but it's only ever as real as her emotions allow it to be. And here's the brutal part. Society feeds this illusion. Movies, music, stories, they all tell men that a woman's love is the greatest prize, the deepest truth, the one thing worth sacrificing everything for. But what they don't tell you is that her love is conditional. Conditional on how she feels in the moment. Conditional on whether or not you continue to spark her emotions. Conditional on her perception of you, not the reality of your loyalty. That's why men give everything, time, money, energy, soul, only to watch her leave when her feelings fade. Because no one told them the truth. A woman's love is not a fortress, it's a fire. It burns bright, it feels eternal, but it can die just as quickly. And if you don't understand that, you'll spend your life building castles in smoke. The illusion of a woman's love is most powerful at the beginning. That's when her eyes shine, when her words drip with devotion, when her touch feels like you're the only man in the universe. She invests everything into the fantasy, projecting onto you the story she's always wanted to believe. And you mistake that projection for genuine love. You think she's loving you for who you are, when in reality, she's loving the version of you that exists in her mind. She's in love with the way you make her feel, not with the reality of who you are as a man. That's why, when reality sets in, and she begins to see your flaws, her love starts to shift, because the illusion can't survive reality. And while you were building permanence, she was living inside a temporary story her emotions created. That's why her love burns so hot at the start, and why it fades so cold later. You'll notice it in how women describe their love stories. They don't say, "He's consistent, steady, reliable." No. They say, "He made me feel alive. He made me feel butterflies. He made me feel like I was the only one." Their love is described through emotion, not logic. And when the emotions fade, the story collapses. That's why she can swear you're her soulmate in one chapter and discard you in the next. She wasn't lying, she was narrating how she felt at the time. But because men equate love with permanence, we think her words are timeless. We think they're vows written in stone, and when she abandons them, we feel betrayed. But the truth is, she didn't betray you. She betrayed the illusion she herself created. And when it stopped feeling real for her, she walked away, no matter how real it still felt for you. This is why men often feel like women never loved them in the first place. Because when she's gone, when she replaces you without hesitation, when she acts like the years you shared never mattered, it feels like everything was fake. But here's the paradox. Her love was real in the moment, but the permanence you attached to it was the illusion. She did love you in the beginning, but only as long as her emotions aligned with the story she was telling herself. Once that alignment broke, the love collapsed. And because her world is built on emotions, she doesn't carry guilt the way you do. She moves on, she rewrites her story, she convinces herself it was meant to end. Meanwhile, you're left haunted by the permanence you thought existed. That's why men carry heartbreak for years, because we loved for real, while she loved through illusion. And here's where men destroy themselves. When the illusion shatters, instead of accepting the truth, they cling harder, they chase, they beg, they try to remind her of the past, thinking it will reignite her love. But her love was never built on memory, it was built on how she feels right now. And right now, she doesn't feel it. That's why your words fall flat, your gestures mean nothing, your sacrifices are forgotten. You're trying to rebuild a fantasy that existed only in her emotional state. But once her emotions shift, the fantasy dies. And no matter how much you bleed for it, you can't bring back an illusion once it's gone. That's why the strongest men aren't the ones who beg. They're the ones who accept the truth, let go, and rebuild their lives without clinging to a mirage. Society won't tell you this because the illusion is what keeps the game alive. Songs, movies, love stories, they all paint a picture of eternal love, of soulmates, of happily ever after. But reality is different. Reality is that women love you as long as you keep feeding their emotions. Reality is that the moment they stop feeling what they want to feel, they'll convince themselves the love is gone. Reality is that her love is not a contract, it's an experience, and experiences end. That's why so many men grow bitter, because they built their identity on the belief that her love was permanent, and when she walked away, their identity collapsed with her. But brother, once you see the truth, that her love is an illusion, you stop depending on it, you stop building your world on her feelings, and you start anchoring yourself in something she can't take away, your own reality, your own mission, your own worth. The reason men fall so hard for the illusion of a woman's love is because of how intoxicating it feels in the beginning. That honeymoon stage, when she hangs on your every word, when her eyes sparkle like you're the only man alive, when she showers you with affection and validation, it feels like a drug. It rewires your brain. It convinces you that you finally found the thing you've been searching for your entire life. And that's why it hurts so much later, because you're not just losing a woman, you're losing the drug. You're losing the high, you're losing the illusion of permanence. That's why breakups feel like withdrawals, because you're no longer just mourning her, you're mourning the fantasy of forever that her love tricked you into believing. Men often say, "But she looked me in the eyes and said she loved me. She promised she'd never leave. She swore I was the one." And they're not wrong. She did say those things, she did mean them in that moment. But here's the harsh truth. Women believe their own illusions. When she said those words, she wasn't lying. She was speaking from the reality of her feelings in that instant. But feelings are fleeting, and when they shift, the promises built on them collapse too. That's why she can move on while you're still clutching her words like scripture. You took them literally, permanently. She took them emotionally, temporarily. And that's the disconnect men must wake up to. Because until you understand this, you'll always be vulnerable to being destroyed by the illusion of her love. What makes this illusion so dangerous is that it blinds men to reality. You'll ignore red flags because you believe her love is enough to overcome them. You'll tolerate disrespect because you think love will make her change. You'll give more than you can afford, financially, emotionally, spiritually, because you're convinced her love guarantees loyalty. And then, when the illusion shatters, you'll realize you were the only one building on permanence while she was living in the present. That's why so many men feel robbed after heartbreak, because they invested in something they thought was eternal, only to find out it was temporary all along. And that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it reshapes how you see the world. Here's the deeper truth. A woman's love is not meant to be the foundation of your life. It's meant to be an addition, not the core. When you make her love the center of your world, you build your identity on something fragile. And when it collapses, so does everything you built. That's why men lose themselves in heartbreak. They lose the identity that was tied to her illusion. But when you shift your perspective and see her love for what it really is, a temporary flame, not an eternal fire, you protect yourself. You stop expecting her to be the anchor of your life. You stop giving her the power to define your worth. And that's when you finally build strength. Because your identity is no longer tied to an illusion, it's tied to reality, to yourself, to your mission. This is why some men never recover from heartbreak. They spend years haunted by the ghost of a love that was never real in the way they thought. They keep replaying her words, her promises, her affection, trying to make sense of how it all vanished. But what they don't realize is that they were never holding on to her. They were holding on to an illusion. They weren't addicted to her. They were addicted to the feeling she gave them. And once you understand that difference, you stop chasing ghosts. You stop clinging to the fantasy. You stop asking questions that have no answers. And you finally start building your life on something that can't vanish overnight, your own reality. One of the most brutal realizations for men is seeing how quickly a woman can replace you after she's done. You'll sit there in pieces, replaying every memory, every promise, every night you stayed up holding her close. And then you'll see her smiling with someone else, acting as if you never existed. That's when the illusion cuts the deepest, because to you, love was permanent. To you, love meant history. To you, love meant loyalty through thick and thin. But to her, love was a story she was telling herself. And when the story ended, so did her investment. She doesn't see it as betrayal, because in her mind, her feelings simply changed. And that's why she can give to another man what she once gave to you, without hesitation. Not because you meant nothing, but because her love was never the permanent foundation you thought it was. It was an experience, and she's already chasing the next one. This is why men often feel used after breakups, because when the illusion fades, they realize how much they gave compared to how much they got back. They realize that while they were building a life, she was building a fantasy. They realized that while they were sacrificing, she was chasing feelings. And when those feelings died, she didn't hesitate to walk away from everything you invested. That's when you start questioning yourself. Was I just a chapter in her story? Did she ever truly love me? Or was she only in love with the way I made her feel? And those questions haunt men because they expose the fragile nature of female love. They expose the fact that her words of forever weren't lies, but they weren't promises either. They were temporary truths in a world built on shifting emotions. The irony is that women don't even realize the illusions they create. They're not sitting there plotting to deceive you. They're swept up in their own emotions. They feel love intensely, and they project that intensity onto you. In that moment, it feels real to them. That's why they can cry, scream, and swear you're there forever, and genuinely mean it. But when their emotions fade, so does their truth. And they don't see that as betrayal, because in their world, truth is whatever feels real in the moment. That's why arguing with a woman about her contradictions never works. That's why reminding her of her promises falls flat, because to her, if she doesn't feel it anymore, then it isn't true anymore. And if you build your life on her version of truth, you'll always be left broken when her feelings change. This is why men must learn to separate affection from reality. Just because she showers you with love in the beginning doesn't mean it will last. Just because she tells you you're her everything doesn't mean she'll still feel that way a year later. And just because she says forever doesn't mean forever exists in her emotional vocabulary. You have to learn to see her love for what it is, a spark, a flame, a moment of intensity, not a lifelong vow. And once you understand this, you stop being fooled. You stop clinging to illusions. You stop expecting her to carry the same weight of loyalty you do. Instead, you start building a life where her love is a bonus, not the foundation, a flame that warms you while it burns, but never a fire you depend on to survive. The men who never learn this truth are the ones who get destroyed over and over again. They give everything, they build their world around her, they anchor their identity to her affection, and every time the illusion shatters, they lose themselves completely. But the men who learn, the men who see a woman's love as temporary, as conditional, as emotional, they stop being blindsided, they enjoy the love while it's there, but they never confuse it with permanence. They take her words lightly, they observe her actions, and they prepare themselves for the day her feelings shift. And because of that, they're never destroyed, they're never caught off guard, they never lose themselves when she walks away, because they were never clinging to the illusion in the first place. They were grounded in reality, and reality, brother, is where your strength lies. The greatest pain a man feels is not when she leaves, it's when he realizes she never loved him the way he loved her. That realization cuts deeper than betrayal, deeper than heartbreak, because it makes you question the very nature of love itself. You think back to all the times she held your face in her hands and swore you were her world, and you realize now those words were not permanent, they were situational. They were as fragile as her feelings in that moment, and when those feelings died, the words died with them. That's the cruel illusion. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't promising either. And as a man, you have to learn to stop equating her passion with permanence. Because if you don't, you'll spend your life being destroyed by illusions she never intended to keep. But here's the shift. Once you understand that a woman's love is an illusion, you stop chasing it as your source of worth. You stop expecting her to be the anchor of your stability. You stop giving her the power to define your identity. You enjoy her love for what it is, a beautiful but temporary flame, but you never confuse it with the eternal fire. You must build within yourself. And when you live this way, you stop being crushed when her feelings change. Because you were never leaning on them in the first place. You were leaning on your own strength, your own mission, your own reality. And that's the key, brother. The illusion loses its power over you the moment you stop depending on it to validate who you are. Ironically, when you stop falling for the illusion of her love, that's when she respects you most. Because women aren't attracted to men who beg for their affection like it's oxygen. They're attracted to men who can walk through life whole, complete, grounded, with or without them. They're drawn to the man who isn't destroyed by her absence, who doesn't panic when her mood shifts, who doesn't cling to her every word like scripture. That man is rare, and rarity is what women chase. She might still live in her illusions, but she'll recognize when she's standing in front of a man who doesn't. And that recognition is what sets you apart from every other guy who falls for the trap. So when you hear her say, "I love you," take it for what it is. Truth in the moment, not a lifetime guarantee. Appreciate it, but don't worship it. Feel it, but don't anchor yourself to it. Because her words are fleeting, but your foundation cannot be. Her love may come and go like the tide, but your mission, your values, your strength, that's the rock you must stand on. And when you live this way, you'll never again be shattered by the illusion. You'll love with open eyes, not blind faith. You'll enjoy her passion without mistaking it for permanence. And you'll carry yourself like the man who knows the truth, that her love is not your salvation, it's just an experience along your path. So remember this, brother. A woman's love is an illusion men fall for, and it's destroyed countless men who built their entire world on it. But once you see the truth, once you stop confusing her feelings with permanence, you become free. Free from the chains of her moods, free from the trap of her contradictions, free from the devastation that comes when the flame dies out. You become a man who doesn't just survive heartbreak, you transcend it. Because you're no longer addicted to her illusion, you're rooted in your reality. And that, brother, is the most powerful place a man can live. She may love you today and leave you tomorrow, but you will still stand. Because her love was never your foundation, you were.